Warnings of a truly dark day for drivers as petrol prices hit a record high across the UK. The average price for a litre of petrol reached 142.94 pence on Sunday. This is according to data that's come from the RAC and Experian Catalist. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by the fuel spokesperson for the RAC, Simon Williams. Simon, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sarah Jane.
I'll start with the obvious question. Petrol prices at a record high now. Why?
The price of oil has gone up. It's doubled in a year. It was at $40 a year ago, now at 85, and probably going further north, unfortunately. But also the exchange rate is lower than it was, about 13% down on 2012 when we had the last record high. And that's important because fuel, like oil, is traded in dollars, so we need the pound to be strong against the dollar, and it's weaker now. In fact, in 2012, oil was $118 a barrel. So that's obviously made an impact. And also, we now have more biofuel in a litre of petrol. Ethanol, the amount of ethanol was increased in September when we moved to E10 petrol. And that's added about 9 pence a litre overall to the mix. So that means now that the pure petrol element's around 42 pence and the bio element is 9 pence. And the retailers too are taking more margin than they did back in 2012. They were taking around 3.5 litre then. Now we're up to about 9 pence. And that's probably something we saw probably just before the pandemic, and it's got worse during the pandemic, and they're kind of trying to make up for lost time. And then you've got duty and VAT. Duties are 58 pence and VAT now equates to 23 pence a litre, and that's gone up about 3p since a year ago.
Yeah, let's talk about tax. In the UK, tax accounts for 57% of the average retail price for petrol. The budget's coming up on Wednesday. The cost of living, a huge issue at the moment. Petrol being able to get about is a part of that for many families up and down the country. Do you think the petrol VAT needs to be looked at by the Chancellor on Wednesday?
Absolutely. We would normally be calling for the duty to be frozen or cut. But due to the change in behaviour from retailers, we think that a VAT cut would be far more beneficial. And obviously, with COP26 and that, there's obviously a lot of pressure on the move to zero-emission driving. So I think going back to 17.5% VAT would take 3p a litre off. And if the retailers were then to put things up, that would be not so bad as actually, cutting VAT and then that being absorbed. But it's obviously very difficult from a driver's point of view. Lots of people would love to go electric, but at the moment, the high upfront costs are still off-putting. And that means that people on the lowest incomes are in the worst possible position. There aren't enough electric vehicles on the second-hand car market at the moment. They need to still filter through. And they are then paying some very, extortionate prices at the pumps. And if they're unlucky enough to drive a car that isn't compatible with E10, then they could be paying £1.55 a litre for the super unleaded, which is still available at the E5 level.
Yeah, Simon, drivers are really getting a double, triple whammy, depending on where you live in the country, because, of course, price of petrol going up, it's not just going to affect individuals, it's going to affect businesses as well. And we know that the knock-on effect of that is increased costs in all areas of our life that, again, affects every one of us. So that's the double whammy. And then if you live in London, for example, the pollution charge zone is being expanded 18 times greater. And as you've just pointed out there, a lot of people that need to drive live in the poorest parts of the country and have to get into cities.
Yes, and we know from RAC research that people are even more reliant on their car now. They may not be driving quite as many miles, but RAC research shows they're more reliant on their cars. And that's partly because there's been a loss of confidence in public transport since COVID. Understanding that people had to rely on their cars more, for getting to work, for going to look after family and friends, to get the shopping, all these reasons. And as you say, businesses are also going to feel it too. We're not far off a record price for diesel as well. We're about £1.50 away from that. That's 147.93, again achieved in April 2012. And I don't think there's any particular end in sight, unfortunately. Some analysts are predicting oil is going to get to $90 a barrel. And if it was to get to 100, I think we'd probably see £1.50 on average across the UK. That's a pretty frightening price, and that's going to cause all kinds of economic negative impact.
Yeah, I mean, those are figures my director just whistled in my ear when you said that last figure, because, of course, you know, people do rely on their cars, and it's not just, you know, for frivolous trips, as you said, to get to work, to get essentials. And this is a really serious issue. The budget on Wednesday, I mean, would you accept even a temporary measure from the Chancellor? As I said, the cost of living is, you know, the hot topic right now, and he's under pressure from all sides to do things that will affect families right now, not in the next year or two.
We have to recognise there are problems with the climate. We need to move towards zero-emission driving, but I think a temporary cut to VAT at 17.5% would help households up and down the country. And so we really urge him to do that. We know that there's going to be a big impact from people not being able to drive, not being able to put enough money into their to fill up their car. It's going to be, you know, tough times, and I can't see it getting better for any time soon. We'd urge retailers also to do their bit. The biggest retailers could reduce their margin a bit, and that would help as well, because that's all kind of before VAT is applied too.
Yeah, and you think it would. And you think it was, sorry, we just had a little camera issue in the studio here if you heard a big crash. It's OK, it's still on the wall. And that's what I was going to say, Simon. Retailers, of course, you think it would be good for them, actually, to cut the price of their fuel because, of course, people will head to their outlets rather than competition.
Yeah, we have quite a lot of sympathy for the smallest retailers. They've struggled to keep going during the pandemic. And, of course, the fuel supply prices also hit them pretty hard because, while it started out as a bigger retailer issue, it meant everyone bought all the fuel, and then the smaller retailers with the weaker supply chain struggled to get their supplies back in, get enough stock back into the ground. So I think the biggest retailers, who do the biggest margin, and actually still had the shoppers coming to them during the pandemic, could afford to kind of reduce their margin again, and that would help everyone. Would probably bring the average price down across the country and help people carry on being able to get to work affordably.
It's very hard to find a winner in all of this at the moment. Simon Williams from the RAC, thank you very much for joining us here on Sky News, talking about that new record high price for petrol. The average now 142.94 pence. And as you heard Simon there, that number looks set to go up.